So as people are coming in, as it is 7:01 according to the clock on this device, I will begin the introduction today. And I'm going to be very brief. There are bios of everybody up on our website, I think. I hope. In any event, my name is Martha Rands. I'm the legal director of the Pacific Legal Education and Outreach Society, and you are here for the Pivoting to Digital Visual Arts edition. If you were expecting a webinar about, I don't know, the latest transitions in yoga, you're in the wrong Zoom room. But if you're here to talk about visual arts and digital stuff, you're in the right place. I am coming to you from the unceded traditional territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and we thank them for their forbearance of our presence on their lands. And we hope, in the spirit of the day tomorrow, that we will actually see some significant movement on these issues from our governments. I don't know, land back, reparations. That's where I personally would go if I had the magic wand. Unfortunately, I don't. And we are here today with Esther Rausenberg, who is the artistic executive director of the Eastside Culture Crawl.
Art Society.
Art Society.
Newly named, sorry, Martha.
Yeah, Eastside Arts Society, which is the home of the Eastside Culture Crawl. And Esther and I have done quite a bit of blabbing over the last 18 months to 2 years, talking about the needs of visual artists in our community. And we've done a couple of webinars with Eastside Arts Society. And I'm looking forward to tonight's conversation with Kate MacDonald, who is a visual artist here in Vancouver and has exhibited all over, including in Los Angeles and elsewhere. And she, her practice and why we are here to talk tonight around the pivot to digital includes working in with digital arts, in the digital arts, as well as in the non-fungible tokens, NFT space, the famous space where Beeple made $1 million and Grimes made $1 million. And I wish we could make $1 million, but it's an interesting space, and it's starting to take up more and more of the various interests. Questions are coming from all over. And we were talking last night about this whole question of the pivot to digital and, you know, the legal issues that arise around NFTs and what it means to work on the blockchain. And in less than 24 hours, ArtNet put up a Q&A from the Artists' Rights Society in the United States. Now, we've got a link in the chat to that article. I also posted it up on Facebook today. It also, I understand that the British Museum has announced that they are getting into the NFT space today. And Another interesting piece came out today that Kate can talk about it a little later, perhaps, which is Lamborghini apparently issued a takedown notice on an artist's work on one of the blockchain platforms, and or one of the platforms that use blockchain to sell NFTs, and the artist's work was indeed taken down. So lots to talk about here. So where should we start, Esther, do you think?
Okay, well, as you said, there's lots to talk about. And when you first, asked me to participate and asked me to invite an artist who I immediately thought of Kate, which we'll get into in a second, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know all the answers to this. And I don't know all the answers. And I don't think anybody knows all the answers, particularly, some of the legal implications here. So we did have a conversation the other night about this. And there's a lot here to kind of try to get through. So I'm just, pleased to say that we're just starting this conversation, but I think that there are many more conversations to be had here. And as you mentioned in your intro, the landscape is changing like every 24 hours, probably changing every hour. And it's really hard to keep up with this space. So before we begin, I guess I'd like to ask Kate. Kate worked in what I would call, well, not what I would call, but she would call as well, had a more traditional based art practice, and she still continues to have that. But over the last 10 years, she has kind of ventured into digital work. And so she kind of maintains both of those practices. And I would like to ask her what she sees is being offered in the digital space that is different, greater, or broader in terms of her artistic expression with a digital medium. So if we can just kind of start off there, and then we'll get into that 3-letter kind of word.
Thank you, Esther, and thank you for having me, Martha, and hi, everybody. One of the things I think that most attracted me to digital art and tech in general was the whole, the DIY movement that kind of began in the 70s and 80s, and then as we had greater computers available to us in our homes and this incredible technology developing at a rapid pace, that within, the DIY part, people were able to have these programs at home and scanners, things that cost a lot of money when you had to do them outside. So I had a background in independent music, and with that, having to, create your album covers and cassette covers and get things printed and do all of those things, I kind of came to have this appreciation for the technology and the software, and could see, and I was painting at that time as well, could see ways that I wanted to use it artistically on top of what I was creating as a painter and 2D artist. And at that time, it was really difficult, of course, to find anywhere to sell anything like that or exhibit it. But fast forward to 2010, by that time I was actually exhibiting in the digital realm in physical galleries. So for example, the Los Angeles Center for Digital Art, and I took part in a number of exhibitions in Europe as well, and the Middle East. And by that time I was doing more screen-based art, but still a lot of digital collage, things like that, things that I could open up Photoshop and start putting images together and taking things out. At the same time, I don't want to say I was moving away from my traditional art, because I was actually creating a lot of the compositions I used in my paintings in these digital programs. So I put something in, take something out, paint over something else, and then I would take that to my studio and make adjustments on my canvases from there. But yeah, going back to say 2010, even up into 2017, for example, selling digital art even to like in a dedicated space like the LACDA that had an audience of art lovers that were coming and looking at work, it was very difficult to actually sell work in that realm. So when NFTs opened up, it became this opportunity to sell this digital work to an audience that understood that owning a JPEG wasn't just a matter of right click save.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there are many artists who are working both in, who are balancing both of those practices, both in what I would call the traditional realm and then also the digital realm. And many of them are really quite perplexed and really quite confused about what I would call the new frontier. And so I guess we're going to move on to what I call the 3-letter word, which a lot of people are like, what in the heck is this all about? And of course, I'm talking about NFTs, or as we know, non-fungible tokens. So clearly, I just want to preface this before we kind of engage in this conversation, that there is a great deal of controversy regarding this space dealing with environmental issues. And this conversation is not about that. This is really about artists being in this space and the legal issues surrounding that. And that's really what we're going to focus on with this conversation that we're having into. So we do want to address a number of legal issues surrounding NFTs, and we have some examples of what that might be. But I guess before, we begin, I want to ask, so Kate, why are you in an NFT? No, actually, maybe you can actually explain what an NFT is, and then I can ask you, why are you in this space?
Oh, well, okay, I can do that. So I guess the best way to explain what an NFT is to explain what fungibility means. So for example, a dollar bill would be fungible because you can take $1 bill and you can replace it with another dollar bill of equal value, and they're virtually the same thing. They have the same value. You can trade them back and forth, easy. Non-fungible, so we'll get it to the blockchain in a second, refers more to something like, say, a signed hockey card, this valuable, one-of-a-kind signed hockey card. So if you took that from someone, you can't necessarily replace it with just another hockey card, and you can't replace it with another signed hockey card, and you probably can't even replace it with the same signature on a similar hockey card. So it's irreplaceable. You might be able to compensate the value to the holder, but you can't actually replace it. So in this case, a non-fungible token is a unit on the blockchain that you can't replace with any other unit necessarily on the blockchain. And you can have additions. You could have, you could mint something and have 10 editions of it or 1,000 editions of it, but it's this one unit on the blockchain, and it's going to be there as long as the internet lives.
Okay, so why are you in this space? And as we know, there are issues and there are challenges, particularly legal issues and challenges, which there are in the traditional space as well, i.e. the C word, which is copyright. I don't think that's the only issue, but this is a new space, and it's really an unknown space. Just like we kind of traveled down that trajectory, with the internet. I don't know how many decades ago that was. So I think that it seems like this is the new frontier, I call it, but it looks like it's kind of settling in. So if you want to kind of talk about why you're in this space.
Well, it is a new frontier, and I think it really is the Wild West. I don't think we're going to see things really settle down for a few more years as ideas around, decentralization and how things can be policed, how all of those things can work. But essentially, I'm in this space because I love digital art and I love making digital art, and I finally have an audience of collectors that understands digital art. So I think for a long time, photography went through the same phenomenon where collectors were like, well, why would I buy a print from you? Because you can just make more prints. And similarly, this is what happens in the NFT space. People say, well, why would I buy that token of that JPEG from you? Because I can just right-click save that JPEG. Well, in essence, you can take an example like the Mona Lisa. That's one of my favorites. The Mona Lisa is owned by one institution. Now, but we all likely have copies of it in books. We might have, them on our screensavers. You might have right-click saved the Mona Lisa yourself and maybe popped it up on Facebook. Just because you have it and you can access it like that doesn't give you ownership of it. And so that's kind of the issue on the blockchain that maybe traditional collectors and artists don't understand, but it's very similar to that. I'm not sure if that's making sense to anyone. And I noticed Martha had a question about minting, and that's minting is the process by which you add your token to the Ethereum blockchain.
Okay. So, all right. So you are working, in this NFT space, and we're kind of seeing who else is and who else do you know is playing in this sandbox? Because I know we had several conversations over the last couple of days, and I know you were kind of not alluding to, but sort of, stating that this might be a good space for individual artists to present their work. And I was asking you about galleries, and I think, you were a bit unclear about gallery participation. And then voila, within 24 hours, we find out, as Martha had indicated in her intro, that the British Art Museum is definitely entering into that space. So, and they're gonna make money off of that. So just kind of curious about how you are working in that space.
Okay, so for example, going back to the British Museum example, what was the name of the artist again? It's a print off artist from Japan.
Oh yeah, because it's the
Hokusai.
yes, thank you.
Hokusai.
The Great Wave.
Yeah. And he passed away a long time ago.
Yes.
So I can see how in a museum who owns his work can take that work and mint it to the blockchain because it's going to one wallet. But in the sense of galleries that represent multiple artists who are still living, that's something that most people on the blockchain are against. They're against this kind of gatekeeping that comes from the gallery system. It's more of a democratization of art. And one thing that would be against it is when you sell an item on the blockchain, those funds go to your individual wallet. So I don't know how you could ensure that a gallery was taking what goes into its wallet and distributing that currency to the artist properly itself. And one of the fascinating and most wonderful things I think about the blockchain is that you can bake into the contract when you mint an artwork what your royalties are going to be in perpetuity. So for example,
okay,
if I sell an item to someone, I build, say, 10% royalty into that price. So when they sell it on, say, the secondary or tertiary market, I'm automatically going to get 10%. I don't have to do anything. That money is going to come out of that sale and automatically go into my wallet because of the way that the transaction's been processed and coded.
Right. So how does, and maybe this is something that I think you have some slides to kind of address, but how does the blockchain or NFTs protect copyright issues, or do they? Clearly, this is a concern with artists. Particularly, most artists are now using social media and the internet to promote and expose their work. We know that there are ways around copyright in that particular space, in that realm. So, they have access to either trying watermarks or all rights are reserved, or, whatever those kind of tools are, trying to protect people from replicating, the work. We know that there are ways clearly around this. We also know that when an artist places their work on Facebook and Instagram, and they might not realize this, but they are actually giving their rights to that third party to present that work, but they're not giving rights or claim to anybody else. However, there are, and we know this, other artists perhaps I should name some of them. Or maybe Martha will name some of them, but there are, or you, Kate, will name some of them, but there are artists who are using that work and as part of their work. And I know that there have been some lawsuits about copyright issues in those instances, because they are mining images from the internet and they are mining other people's work from the internet. So we know that's what happens on the internet. How do you see your work protected in the MFT realm?
Well, I think, and this is something I tell traditional artists when I have an opportunity to speak with them about the NFT space, is that one thing you have to worry about, because your work is out there and it's easy to right click save, is that anybody else could be taking your work and minting it themselves. And if you're not active in the space, no one is going to know that that was your work that was stolen. So in essence, I think artists should be getting ahead of that and minting their work themselves and having it there. And then in a sense, it's protected because it's effectively dated on the blockchain. And they are listed as the creator at that moment. And you can put in your description whatever you want to say about it. You don't have to sell it. You can put things on the blockchain and they can just be stored there until you decide you want to sell it. Maybe you want to wrap it with a physical piece at some time in the future. But in a sense, you're protecting that work. And one of the problems is it's an entirely different art community than the art community you're used to. So in the NFT community, everybody is kind of always looking at each other's work. They're collecting, they're on Instagram, they're on Twitter. They have eyes everywhere because they want to see what everyone is doing. And there's no police force, it's centralized. So when they see an artist has been copied, they'll call it out. But if you're not in that space with everyone else and they don't know who you are, then somebody can copy mint your work and they might slide by with it for years and until it's noticed, if it's ever brought to the other artists.
Yeah, if I can ask, Kate, the Lamborghini example that you mentioned just in our little pre-webinar discussion, I am assuming that this was probably a work that was maybe using an image of Lamborghini that they didn't see before, because I can imagine, I mean, there's just no shortage of artists who play around with corporate imagery of one form or another, and it would be really and you know, it's actually difficult for most corporations to police, and they don't really police that depends on the environment. I would expect, though, if Lamborghini is paying attention, it's because of the amount of money that is at issue, and they don't want anybody trading on their brand and making money off of it except them. Right? But I'm curious, what was the image and what, I mean, do you know?
I do, and I can actually share it with you. What's interesting about this image is it's not a picture of a Lamborghini. It's an illustration that doesn't even include the logo. So I'm gonna put it up on my slides, and I'll share the screen. Yeah, 1 second. There we go. And I just happened across this this morning. I've been having lots of conversations on Twitter with people because in the community talking about these things. So people are making sure. I saw these items for tonight. Let me bring my Zoom back. I'm just going to share my screen here. Here we go. So this was the original tweet I saw this morning that Lamborghini had sent, and this is the collector who's tweeting this. So when a work has been sold to a collector, the platform, in this case foundation, if there's a dispute about the piece or it's been reported or there's a takedown notice, the platform can go in and remove the image from the wallet. So you own a token, but the token doesn't have an image attached to it. And I'm just gonna, I have another, the next slide will actually show you the image in detail. And it's actually not a static image. It's a moving image. It's like maybe a 5-second GIF.
Almost like a GIF or something, yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
So this is the image that
I
received the
guess I
takedown
guess it
notice.
has some identifiable design.
Attribute. Yeah, design
Design.
element.
I wonder if they have trade dress protection in the United States over the particular look of the Lamborghini. That may well be the legal justification, rather than copyright.
And
That's like, the Coke bottle.
Yeah.
The particular design.
Right, the shape of it, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
That is under trade dress. You could think of it sort of as a subcategory under trademark rather than under copyright.
Right.
But I would imagine that that's the basis for them taking issue.
but
So we
But-
do know,
no.
I know we're gonna let you butt here. But I just want to add, just something here about the States versus Canada. We know that the States is much more litigious, and that their copyright actually differs from ours. So we have to be clear about that. And so now I'll let Kate go into the but. And I think we know that the States is much more litigious, and people are suing people left, right, and center for all kinds of things, and that doesn't necessarily happen in Canada. And it's as we know, legal fees are unaffordable, and Plio's doing great work in terms of offering artists advice and all of that, but it costs a lot to litigate.
Okay.
So, but I'll take that over.
Yeah, and I should say we can't.
No, I understand.
We don't do any representation because
No.
going to federal court is a big deal, and it's hard to find people who will do it on a pro bono basis.
Right, and that's where copyright.
This is so interesting. So this is the notice of infringement that Lamborghini issued to the, and this is to the collector, yeah?
Yeah, so go, Kate, sorry.
This is the email that the artist received.
Okay.
And I have it in two pieces so that it's a little bit larger. So it's
but maybe you can paraphrase what's in here because it's a bit challenging.
Yeah, it's based on the DCMA, which I'm going to assume Martha can explain in better detail.
It's the Digital Copyright Millennium Act.
That's right. So Foundation is required by law to take it down because they've received this report of an infringement from Lamborghini. And their response back to the artist is, well, you're just going to have to respond back explaining why it isn't an infringement. But consensus seemed to be, and I mean, this is the internet, so
yeah,
you have to take everything with a grain of salt, was that it actually had to do possibly with how the artwork was described and not to do with the artwork itself.
Yeah, no, yeah, I doubt it, because if you actually go back, the language of it, go to the first slide. There you go. It says, which includes trademarks, designs, and/or patents applicable in multiple, as well as copyrighted and related rights. This is a blanket. This is blanket language to cover a myriad of rights issues. My guess though is that it has more to do with the design and trademark and trade dress issues than it does copyright per se. I mean, it seems to me to be overreach. It's like, other than I guess there's an identifiability to it. But the only reason that Lamborghini is doing this is because they presumably think that there's money to be made.
And I've got to say, though, there are literally thousands of NFTs that include pictures of Lamborghinis because Lamo, like it's a thing, when Lamo to the moon. I mean, but what's interesting was another take I saw on this whole thing by another collector that this is added value to the token.
No doubt.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
What is
so it's kind of because it's being litigated that somebody actually has a greater interest in ownership of that token. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
And the token is owned by a collector already. So that's an interesting piece.
Yeah, and you know, that was actually Joey Keithley from DOA. He said, you know, if somebody steals their stuff, he's gonna he feels that this actually adds value. That was his absolute perspective on copyright when we talked about it in whatever 2015 or something on a panel, and he was like, you know, it's all good publicity, man. It just ratchets up the value. And that was the case in the Richard Prince. Richard Prince is notorious for taking Instagram posts and then blowing them up and almost, you know, you basically doing nothing other than maybe he adds a few words at the bottom. And he did this with a couple of women who were designing, as I remember it, sort of burlesque wear, bustiers and such, and sort of gothic. They were goths. And their response to this infringement, which was clearly a copyright infringement, they turned around and made it into a selling bonanza. They made a huge amount of money. They suddenly became, you know, international. It went viral. They got a lot of press out of it, and they issued a whole series of new items based on Prince's work.
Yeah.
I mean, which was really a copy of their own work, but they were like, here's your opportunity to buy a Richard Prince. And he of course thought it was all very funny. And they made the most of it. Whereas there's an African-American photographer whose work was used, whose name is, I'm going to say, Donald Graham, who actually has commenced litigation against Richard Prince for doing this exact thing, which was taking his imagery. He's a very, very highly respected photographer, fine art photographer, whose work was just basically ripped by Prince. And, you know, in the United States, as Esther said, the way that the law is interpreted is different because of fair use, which is a different standard than in Canada, which is fair dealing. And under fair use, there's a concept called transformative use, which we've yet to have litigation in Canada where a court is actually approved of transformative use that would be perhaps a way to argue for some of this, what we might call remixing in certain circles. But it's a gray area in Canada because we haven't got established case law where they do in the US.
Right. And so that's kind of, you know, unfortunate news for anybody who's listening in on this, because, you know, to litigate is really expensive. And so it's really difficult for artists to protect their work. There's no question about that. And so we are seeing people, you know, tapping into the work that they're gleaning, you know, off of the internet and websites. And, you know, I've had several artists through the Culture Crawl contact me because their work is being copied in China, and what can they do? And so I think an artist who actually is making a really good living, they might be able to say, hey, that's great. It's putting me out there. But for many other artists, it's not necessarily a good news story. And where did you want to go with that, Kate?
I wanted to go back to the Lamborghini case for just one second. There's one thing in this story we're not touching on, and that's the fact that the collector who paid for this piece no longer has that image in his wallet. I mean, he might have a JPEG saved of it somewhere and he owns the token. So somebody's asked how quick, easy it was for them to take the work down. I'm going to say it's probably been up for a while because it's already been sold. Obviously, Lamborghini's been searching around, looking for, things that break its brand and issuing these notices. But what happens with this collector is everything in the NFT space is buyer beware. So that image is gone from his wallet, and there's no compensation for that.
Right.
Yeah.
But isn't everything buyer beware? Because you really, I mean, if you're just buying things and you're not actually seeing, and even when you see things, you're just assuming that they are what they are, and you have a conversation. I mean, I know, some unreputable kind of gallerists who have sold work that isn't really what we thought it was. Well, I don't know them personally, but I know of situations where that's happened, where it's been the forger who's, sold the work to a gallery, and the gallery actually knew what was going on. But I have to say, Kate, you seem to think that this space is different. So I want you to kind of talk about how you believe that space is different from the more kind of traditional spaces that artists have been working in. What do you see as the pros, and then what do you see as the cons?
So one of the pros, I think, is because everything is so much online, is that you have this larger community of artists that you're actually connecting with. There's a whole lot of collaboration in this space. People are always doing projects together and doing even group projects. I'm in a couple of different groups where we'll make these smaller NFTs and we'll all release them on the same day with the same hashtags and promote each other's work. So there's more of that in this space, the sense of community, than there is necessarily in the traditional artwork world, where a lot of artists are alone in their studios, or they talk to their regular 4 or 5 other artists that they see on a weekly basis. Whereas I go online and I talk to probably easily 25 different people in a day, if not 50 to 100, if I'm in a Discord server or actually speaking with people in spaces. Yeah, there's a lot of interaction, and people are looking at each other's work. They're looking to see what's different, interesting, and you get a lot of feedback.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to me that one of the stories that came out last week was this individual who was basically insider trading off one of the platforms, right? And he was found out because one of the people in the community identified that he was moving NFTs around that were either ahead of the announcement that this would go on sale, and that it was going into eventually his wallet somehow. He figured this out. And I thought, well, this is interesting because it seems like there's a sort of self-policing going on, that it's in a way like, yeah, when we were talking originally, you actually said that people are more worried about copyright, or more attentive to copyright, might be a better way of putting it, because the foundation of the whole enterprise depends on a certain level of veracity, a certain level of trust, right? And so that is very interesting to me.
Well,
that flies
I want to let Kate respond to that, and then I'm going to play devil's advocate, because everything isn't that Pollyanna and that pretty, right?
Absolutely, but I want to,
and yeah, so let's go, Kate.
well, I want to make the point, first of all, that insider trading is a huge issue within the traditional art world. Anyway, if you look at the auction houses and things, there's Damien Hirst's piece, For the Love of God, the diamond skull.
Yeah.
It's worth what it's worth because him and a consortium own that piece together and have said that's what they paid for it, which we all know is utter. Yes, and it's a beautiful work. I love it. It's not worth $1 million or whatever it is valued at
more,
today.
I think. Yeah.
But what happens on the blockchain, that's fantastic, is that the ledger is completely open to the public. If you know somebody's wallet address or where a work is stored, you can watch how it moves over time and what those transactions are. I go to a website when I see somebody's interested in my work to even see if they can afford it, right? Is this like BS coming from this collector that they want to buy this work, or do they actually have the funds, available in their Ether wallet that I can see are there?
Right. So the Luddite that I am, and I am in terms of, technical things, I'm not really in the digital realm. I just got a cell phone just to kind of give you an example of how far behind I am. And I'm still very much rooted in the last century. But there are things that, I do know about this space. And one of them is, we kind of alluded to this earlier on, is that somebody could impersonate me. And so they could take all my work. I wouldn't even know, because I'm the Luddite who's not in that space. And they could take all of my whole body of work and they could put it on there. I don't even know that it's being traded there and selling there, because I'm not in that space. And so what do you say to artists who aren't in that space and perhaps maybe don't want to be in that space, or technically are challenged, but also something we haven't mentioned is that there is a cost to being in that space. And if you want to put up your artwork, and you know better than I what that cost is, but from what I've been reading, it's like, for each token, you're talking about anywhere from it's starting off at, I don't know, is it $70 to something, per token. So there is a cost. So if I have 100 artworks that I wanted to place on there, even if I don't want to play the game, it's still going to cost me, I don't know what the math is on that, $1,000, or I don't know, 7,000.
Just a second. So
yes.
there
Okay,
is
I'll
an
slow
issue.
down. There's lots there. Sorry.
There's lots to unpack there. So
Yeah.
there are an issue with gas fees, mining fees on the Ethereum blockchain. Right. So what's happening with that right now is we're kind of waiting for Ethereum 2.0. We just had, it was called the London hard fork. They're hoping to institute a proof of stake network as opposed to proof of work system that we have now. I know that's really technical. I'm not going to get into all of it. But if you don't want to mint on the Ethereum network because of the costs, there are options such as, it's called a Matic, which is a kind of a wrapped Ether on the Polygon network. So you can mint for free, essentially there. And there's also something called the Tezos blockchain. There are platforms such as Calumet and Hicketnunk. It's hard to say, Hicketnunk. We call it Hen, where minting costs you pennies. So there are ways to get your work on the blockchain, whether you're selling it or not, that are really economical. You don't have to put everything on Foundation or Maker's Place or Known Origin or wherever you want to mint it, or you can lazy mint, called lazy minting on OpenSea for free once you've set up a collection, which is a one-time cost, but it's not properly minted until it actually sells, and then the gas fee is paid at that time.
Okay, so that's good to know that, because when I was looking at the prices, it sort of seemed prohibitive, because if each piece is $70 and then, multiply that by 10, that's 700 and, whatever.
So they're called gas trackers. You can follow and get alerts from, so you know when gas is going up or gas is going down. So if you're planning on minting something, you kind of follow the gas and you don't do it on a day where there's like a 10,000 generative PFP project dropping or something like that. So back when I started, you could mint for like $10 or $15, but say there's this big drop on a day, you go to mint. I have seen gas go up to $2,000, like for a small portion of time to mint one thing. I mean, obviously you just reject that transaction and try again another day.
Okay, interesting.
Right? Because it's a market. It's
right.
If demand is here.
Well, that's complex, a lot more complex than, I thought it was. So it's not, so it's kind of like the stock market. So some days up, some days down. And so when you go to mint, you want to mint hopefully on a day when it's a little less, if you're on those platforms that are charging money as opposed to those ones that aren't. Got it.
Well, it's not even the platforms charging the money. It's the miners who are
okay.
processing the transactions on computers all over the world, which is.
Gotcha.
But Tezos is a really nice cheap blockchain to mint on.
Yeah. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I think April, if you're still on participating, yeah, so this is where the project that Access Copyright and Carfac and RAV are doing is, I think in Primo, the whole purpose of that exercise is to enable people to uh, access the blockchain as a medium for attribution and tracking,
And provenance.
as you say in the chat here, April, the life cycle of an artwork.
I want to go back to that because April's saying not all blockchains involve NFTs, but the function she's describing that Carfac is using is an NFT. Just because it's an NFT doesn't mean it has to be for sale. NFTs, the entire Ethereum blockchain, was created and envisioned because people took a look at Bitcoin and said, what if we could add a token to this? And what they thought that would happen is it would be used for real estate purchases and transactions, things like professional licensing and certification, items like that, where you're going to want to track things over time in kind of a decentralized and essentially open manner. But what ended up happening was gamers and artists got to the space first. So now when people hear NFTs, they think we're talking about a collectible or an art project. But in effect, it was actually created to assign provenance and ownership,
Yeah,
proof of
which is
ownership.
precisely why Access and Carfac got into this space, and the one of the issues that we've always had in this space is not really having a solid. We don't know what the repertoire actually is in any serious way. Like, we don't register copyrights in Canada. We have no way of actually tracking probably, 50%, let's say, of all the artwork created. We never gets verified, nobody's inventorying it. Most of the artists I know don't create their own damn inventories. So what I think the blockchain actually affords is a mechanism by which to finally begin to do that. And if you had, entities like copyright collectives, like Access Copyright, in a position to effectively participate and enable artists to access and use it to their benefit for the purposes of provenance alone, it could be a game changer. And I think, one time, I mean, honestly, we're not going to go into this today, April, but we could talk about resale royalty rights and the need for this in Canada, and the reality of secondary and tertiary markets and proper valuation and remuneration of artists. I mean, I think that has been an ongoing issue. There's an entire section of the Heritage Canada report devoted to remuneration of artists. And I'll be interested to read the Heritage Minister's mandate letter when it comes out in the next week or two, to see if they're actually if there's going to be anything new. But I wonder if there are any questions that we want to address before, because we're getting close to.
Yes, that's where I was going to go next. So if there are, we'd love to see them, hear them. And if they're not, I'll just keep talking until there is a question that is posed. But I'd like to know, what exactly do you own when you own an NFT? Because you don't necessarily own the physicality of the art. So you don't own the Mona Lisa, but you could own however many editions they've kind of presented of the Mona Lisa online. So what exactly are you owning when you buy an NFT?
That you own the token on the blockchain, essentially. Now, a lot of times there's unlockable content within these tokens. So, and people are now talking about utility. What's the utility with this token? So can you use it, say, as your profile picture? Or is there a version that's the right size I can use for a screensaver? Or is there also a version that's the right size I can use as the screen on my phone? Kind of interesting ideas like that. And people are actually attaching physical pieces of artwork to the token, where if somebody buys the piece or the token, they will ship the artwork to that individual. But and this is where things get kind of weird, there's no mechanism by which that person has to send that physical piece along if they sell the token on the secondary market.
Right.
Oh.
But at the same time, the way that market is structured right now is you have true believers in blockchain, in decentralization, and the token, and they don't want your physical artwork.
Right. Gotcha. So I'm just looking at these questions. So April asked, so you talked a little bit about legal implications. What about tax? And in particular, when sales are happening through foreign platforms?
No
So
idea.
well, Kate can answer that because she sells work through that. So she can kind of respond to that.
Okay, so, haha, this is so much fun. I talk about this all the time with people.
Put you on the spot.
And this is wide open. The CRA has a very small office devoted to crypto, and they're not very clear in the regulations right now. So the way the CRA views how you earn cryptocurrency varies on how you earn it. So if you're, say, trading it and exchanging it for fiat currency, then that would incur a capital gains tax for the year that you trade it to fiat currency. Now they tax it a different way if you're bartering it, say as you would an art sale, and you should be paying GST on it, that art sale, no matter what country that token is being sold to. But then there's also, if you're mining cryptocurrency, that's a different tax issue entirely. And then, of course, with the pandemic and the rapid growth in what's happening in the cryptocurrency markets in the past year, a lot of the CRA employees aren't even working from the office. They're all at home. So good luck trying to call and get any advice on this at all right now. I mean, obviously that's going to change. So I suggest, and a lot of people down in the States in particular, suggest, getting your ducks in the row as best as you can with how you're dealing with your cryptocurrency and keeping those taxes up to date so that you can at least show good faith in the future if something were to happen.
So are you paying income tax then on, like, based on, so my crypto is valued at let's say $1,000. I have a $1,000 value in my wallet on at December 31st, which would be the end of the tax year.
But how did the cryptocurrency get in your wallet? And have you exchanged it for fiat yet?
No.
Right.
But like, if you're tracking sales, right, you would be paying income tax on your sales. So when you say to get ducks in a row, I'm thinking, well, then you would have to track your sales and pay tax on. But I guess because you haven't converted it, is the theory then you're not, it's tax. But the moment that you translate, I see, but the minute that you do anything with that crypto, then you're going to pay a capital gain on that.
Yeah. So how many times are you going to pay this tax?
Capital gains is high.
Well, capital gains is 50%, right?
Yeah.
You only end up, whereas income, sometimes you're paying more than that when something's taxed as additional income that you haven't paid personal income tax on yet.
Right. So if
And then this
were to-
opens up the case of how do these minor fees get refunded back to the artist as a cost of doing business?
Well, and if you never take the money back and it's just sitting in your wallet, then how do they even know that you've got, so if you've, gained like 10, 20,000 in crypto, how do they even know that that money exists? I mean, are you letting, like, how does anybody know that? I guess when they go ahead, Kate.
Well, you could have money in your wallet.
Yes.
They're not necessarily going to be able to see that, but what they can see is because you can't just trade it in your wallet to currency, you have to move it to a brokerage.
Right.
Which is the same as you register with your bank. They have their social insurance number. They keep track of all your transactions because, of course, money laundering is a big issue in this. So to get it into fiat, you have to move it somewhere else, and it's being tracked there.
Okay. But I think that it's still the Wild West. I mean, I think it's kind of pretty hard for them to figure out, like, if you use the money in your wallet to buy other things, that might not be trackable. So anyway, I think this is a lot more complex than what we're able to handle at this point in time, given that we only have a few minutes left. Somebody did ask the question about, what are any recommended resources for artists to learn about getting started in the NFT space. So I don't know, Kate, if you have any advice there, and Martha, you too?
Do lots of reading is what I would suggest. Lots and lots of reading. There's lots of interesting stuff on YouTube channels now. I did do a workshop with the Eastside Arts Society earlier this year to teach visual artists about how to get into the NFT space, and I might repeat something like that at some future time. I would say the best way is just to kind of get involved in the Twitter community, see what kind of articles people are sharing, what's kind of happening newsworthy. I wouldn't rely necessarily on mainstream news media, because what it always kind of seems to boil back down to, this sold for this much, or it's using this much energy. And if you want an in-depth idea of how it all kind of works, you're better off maybe looking at the FAQs on Foundation, joining something like, say, the OpenSea Discord, going to those marketplace sites and following the links down from there.
Yeah. And we'll also assemble what we can. If the Center for Art Law has done some recent webinars on various aspects of the digital space recently. They're out of New York. Again, the information will be American, but they might have some more up-to-date material. And the other spots that, we probably wouldn't be able to do this instantly, Laura, but, the volunteer lawyers for the arts in the US, there are some very large ones like in New York and California that I'm sure as this space becomes more developed, I think there's a lot of questions around the enforceability of the contracts. Eventually, there's probably going to be litigation. Somebody will try to fight something. I don't know, a collector maybe will try to go after getting the work back because it represents a loss, and they decide they're going to do it for whatever reason. And I think there are people, I know a number of lawyers who are very active on the blockchain now. And I suspect we'll start to see more of that. And we'll be certainly monitoring it as time passes.
And my words of wisdom, as with anything, because as you know, the person involved with putting on the culture crawl, I get a lot of individuals who are interested in tapping into our artists and trying to sell them, whatever, a song and a dance, I guess it is. And so I'm the gatekeeper, and I've had a number of people who have wanted to tap into our hundreds of artists who are on our list. And I've actually kept them at bay, because at this point, I honestly believe in, and I do a lot of the time, buyer beware. So really be careful as to what you enter into. Do your research. This is a new space. Kate has been navigating this for the last 10 years, so she has clearly some insights into it. I'm sure that she's had some other experiences that we haven't heard about tonight. Somebody asked if there's a transcript available of the chat, so I don't know some of those. I don't know the answers to some of those questions.
Links, we'll make sure that the links that are referenced are shared. You know, my suggestion is obviously subscribe to the Pleo newsletter, get active in following what we're doing. The National Network of Legal Clinics for the Arts is a major initiative across the country. And yes, this recording will be circulated and it'll be posted on the website along with all the pivoting to digital conversations, because you know, this is the beginning of you know, this whole area. So yes, we'll be doing everything we can to circulate stuff.
Right, and somebody asked whether they can get a transcript of the chat along with the closed caption transcript. So I don't know the answer to that.
Probably not, but we'll make we do actually do a summary of the conversation that is put on our website, and to whoever asked it again, please subscribe to the website because it's all there. And thanks everyone. With given that it is 8 o'clock and some of us turn into pumpkins at this hour, I know I do. I want to thank Esther and Kate for taking the time both before tonight and really engaging us in this conversation, and everybody for coming, and thanks to Sarah for being our tech host, the hostess with the mostest.
Hostess, yes.
And we'll see you next time. I think our next pivoting to digital will be theater in November with the Greater Vancouver Professional Theater Alliance, the GVPTA.
Yeah. And thank you, Martha, for allowing us to kind of, you know, go back and forth with this. And we're all learning as we go along. So this has been great.
Great. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.